It's probably not over Steve Serby's pay scale. This guy's been dialed in on everything. Up in New York, the New York Post. Steve, thanks for taking the time. How long have you been up there at the Post? I mean, I remember seeing you the first time I ever walked into a locker room up in New York back in the old days when the Mets had it going on with Strawberry and all those guys. You've been around forever.
Yeah, I have. I founded the New York Post. Not too many people know that. But my first year at the Post was September of 1972. Where were you in September of 72? 19,
I was
not
living
18.
in Virginia Beach, Virginia, in about seventh grade, about fifth grade.
Fifth grade. Wow. You're younger than I am by many, many years.
Well, I mean, that's amazing. In the 1970s, was that Willie Mays running around back then with the Mets?
Yeah, in the early 70s. Yep.
God, that's amazing how long you've been there. Congratulations. That's just an incredible, incredible career. You know, I want to ask you something that all the years, the 30-plus years I'd come in there doing baseball games and 25 years doing NFL games, I always marveled at the ability of athletes to thrive in New York and other guys who just seem to wilt in New York. Do you think there is a common thread or character trait or two of the guys that thrive as opposed to those that don't?
Yeah, the guys that thrive are comfortable in their own skin, and the guys that don't are not. The guys that don't can't deal with the scrutiny, with the volume of media. You know, the media is not necessarily tougher or harder on guys in New York. There's just more of us. And some guys just can't deal with the spotlight, and especially nowadays with social media, they're better off staying off social media and never pressing send. And some of them just want to be ball players. I remember when Jeff Torborg was managing the Mets, and they were god awful back then. They were the worst team money can buy. And in '93, I actually covered the Mets for the New York Daily News, and they were worse than the worst team money can buy. Vince Coleman, Eddie Murray, Dallas Green ended up replacing Torborg. But I remember, and Bobby Bonilla was on that team, I remember sitting in Torborg's office right before a game, and something came up, probably with Bonilla, because a lot of stuff came up with Bonilla back at that time. And Torborg just said out loud to no one in particular, "I just want to manage baseball." So he was not cut out for New York, because in New York, you got to manage more than just a baseball team. So anyway, yeah, the guys that are comfortable in their own skin are the ones that generally make it, and the ones that aren't do not.
I'll tell you the guy that surprised me maybe more than anybody else, and I mean, you talk about a guy who thrived in New York, was Paul O'Neill. When he left here in Cincinnati, you know, he's a small town outside of Columbus guy. He I'm not going to say shy, but and he can be a little arrogant and all but he seemed to be the kind of perfect guy to be in a market like Cincinnati. And then when he's traded for Roberto Kelly there, I thought to myself, wow, it's going to be interesting to see how he does up there. I think you can make an argument that over the last 30, 35 years, I'm not saying he was the best player that ever played for the Yankees. That would be ridiculous. But he was pretty damn good for a long, long time. And boy, did he thrive in New York.
Yeah, well, talk about a guy who knew who he was as a ball player, and I think he enjoyed being on the New York stage, being on the New York Yankees, and he was the warrior. The fans loved him. He would bash in water fountains and kick things, and they loved that intensity, and he loved playing for a winner, and he was a winning ball player, and Yankee fans will remember him always as the warrior. And yeah, I mean, he was intense, but he didn't shy away from things. He was fearless. And that's another quality you need in New York. You got to be fearless, and that's what O'Neill was.
All right, I want to jump into some of the ongoings with football. We've been bouncing around leading up to the draft about looking at different teams, and we like to ask the questions, where you been, where are you now, where are you going, right? So let's start. You're well versed in both teams. Let's start with the Jets for a minute here. Robert Saleh comes in, has his kind of quotes he makes about the Jets and this and that, and I'm keeping track of all you guys who are saying stuff about us and so on and so forth. The whole Zach Wilson thing, from the outside looking in, what happened there?
Well, he was the second overall pick in the draft. They threw him to the Wolves, and the Wolves ate him alive. They didn't handle him well at all, and he should have probably sat at the beginning of his career. He came out of BYU, and everything was handed to him, and he ended up feeling entitled, and he got hurt. He couldn't stay on the field, which was part of his problem at BYU, and he wasn't coached very well, and he didn't have the same luxury, the same benefit that Daniel Jones had. Daniel Jones sat for 2 weeks, but the entire training camp he got to learn from Eli Manning and watched how to be a professional under Eli Manning. And Daniel Jones was readier to begin his pro career than Zach Wilson was. And the jury is out on Zach Wilson. It's too early to call him a complete bust, but there's a reason the Jets are scrambled to land Aaron Rodgers, and that's because they whiffed on Zach Wilson with the second pick of the draft. And quarterbacks are so hard to project from college to the pros. Look at all the mistakes we've seen over the years. Jamarcus Russell, starting with him, and Jeff George and Heath Schuler and this guy and that guy. It's mind-boggling that all these sharp football minds that end up with paralysis by analysis, they study these guys year-round, and they can't get quarterback right. And that'll be interesting this year with these 4 quarterbacks, whether any of them make it, whether one of them makes it, whether 2 of them makes it. It's a crapshoot when it comes to quarterbacks. So many things have to fall into place. The right head coach, the right ownership, the right system, and Zach Wilson was swallowed up by all of it and did not do as good a job relating to his teammates as the guy who followed him, Mike White. His teammates loved Mike White, who was the backup, and wanted to play for Mike White, and the Jet teammates did not want to play for Zach Wilson. The kid does, apparently the coaches love him, or did love him, and gave him every opportunity to succeed. But once in that press conference after the Patriots game in New England, when he was totally inept, he was asked if he felt responsible to the defense, and he said no. And that was the end of Zach Wilson in New York right there.
Okay. Which brings us to, I'm sure, the most, it's got to be in the top 2 most written about, talked about stories in all the NFL, and especially right there in New York. Is the Aaron Rodgers thing going to happen?
Yeah, we think it's going to happen, yeah. As soon as the Packers decide to get off their butts, the Packers are doing what they should do. They're trying to extract as much as they can from the Jets. And it's a matter of who's going to blink first. And eventually, one or both will blink together. The Packers need to get rid of Aaron Rodgers and his $58 million contract. And the Jets desperately need Aaron Rodgers. They've sold their fan base on getting Aaron Rodgers. And it will happen. Whether it happens on draft night, I don't know. But the Jets are trying to hang on to that 13th pick. I'm not Joe Douglas, but I wrote about a month and a half ago that, look, if you have to surrender the 13th pick, surrender the 13th pick. Joe Douglas did a great job with the draft last year with the offensive rookie of the year, Garrett Wilson, the defensive rookie of the year, Sauce Gardner. Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall, the best running back arguably the best running back in the draft, along with Kenneth Walker. But they have a lot of young pieces, and they've brought in some experienced veterans, Tyler Conklin, C.J. Uzama at tight end. So they don't need that 13th pick as much as they need Aaron Rodgers. Now, they still want that 13th pick because their offensive line needs a little bit of repair, with Mekhi Becton and Dwayne Brown still question marks. So they could draft a tackle with that 13th pick, but I think Jet fans are getting very anxious about this Aaron Rodgers thing, and it's time for the Jets and the Packers to leave their personal darkness retreats and get a deal done. And it could get done sometime between now and June 1. And I think it will get done.
Hey, Steve, you've forgotten more than I'll ever know about, drama in New York, okay? World's biggest stage. And the drama king would be coming to New York in Aaron Rodgers. I know you don't have a crystal ball. Man, oh, man. Would that be a marriage made in heaven for those of us on the outside looking in? Seriously, what would you expect out of that whole thing? Because, Rodgers is there in Green Bay. I mean, it's the 200th largest city, whatever it is, 300th in America, and now he's walking into the Big Apple.
Well, he wants this. He wants to show the Packers that he's got plenty of elite football left. And New York, I don't think is going to scare him. He'll speak his mind, and he'll get raked over the coals from time to time. Some people will find him very insightful and thoughtful. Others will find him to be a jerk. But I don't think he cares. He'll go on Pat McAfee, say what he has to say, and he'll answer the way he wants to answer it the day after. But I don't think New York's going to scare him, and I think the Jets, knowing the Jets as I do, will shelter him. I remember when Brett Favre became a Jet in 2008, they used to have a public relations director walk Favre out after the game, after his press conference, to make sure that there were no further questions for him. So I'm sure that'll be the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. And I don't think he's going to get touchy-feely with members of the media, other than Pat McAfee on his show. And I think part of Aaron Rodgers will enjoy the give and take with the media, and he'll enjoy ruffling some feathers. And New York won't scare him. I don't believe New York will scare him. He'll see it as a challenge with that beautiful mind of his.
Do you think that if the Jets, and you talked about Sauce Gardner, that their secondary is really good, it's very young, their defense is good. I know they've lost a couple of guys, but I mean, their defense is really good. It was among the top 3, 4 in virtually every category there was last year. Offensively, you see some of the weapons you talked about, maybe the need for another tackle on offense. Running game, if the kid comes back healthy, from a knee injury, that kind of thing. Knowing the rest of the AFC landscape, clearly the power have shifted to the AFC here, especially because of quarterback play. Here in Cincinnati, you have Burrow. You have Mahomes in Kansas City. You have Herbert out in Los Angeles. You got Josh Allen up in Buffalo. On and on and on and on. When Rodgers comes to the Jets, are they a legitimate Super Bowl contending team?
I would say they are one of the legitimate Super Bowl contending teams, yes. And you forgot about Lamar Jackson, who I expect to be with the Ravens once they come to terms. And, Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, who knows? He'll obviously be better than he was a year ago.
Yeah.
So, the AFC is loaded with quarterbacks, with elite quarterbacks. And look, the Jets, that's a tough division. Buffalo is still Buffalo. They've lost some pieces. They lost Tremaine Edmonds, and they are not the top contender. They're not the team to beat anymore in the AFC. Obviously, Mahomes and the Chiefs are the team to beat. But the Jets are one of the teams in the conversation. They should be a playoff team. There's no reason why, with that roster, with that defense, and with Aaron Rodgers throwing to Garrett Wilson and his favorite receiver Alan Lazard, and Breece Hall, if he comes back healthy, there's no reason why they should not be a playoff team. And then once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. But the Dolphins have playoff hopes as well. And I mentioned the Bills, and Bill Belichick. This is as close to a must-win season as Belichick has had in a long time, and I won't bet against Bill Belichick. But right now, as we sit here today, they're the last place team in the AFC East. But again, it's risky business to bet against Belichick. Yeah. And now that he's got Bill O'Brien back, assuming he can straighten out Mac Jones, and assuming Bailey Zappi will not beat out Mac Jones. But I think Belichick will be comfortable with Zappi if that's the way it plays out in New England. But that division is murder. But I do expect the Jets to emerge and make the playoffs.